And let me just look at what happens, how you look. And
like
I've seen some where they're losing consciousness.
Oh, man.
It just looks horrible. And then it's even worse when they wake up.
Oh.
And you do this thing called the funky chicken. There we go.
Yeah.
And the people usually are like,
gosh.
What happened? They're unaware, blissfully unaware. And that's funny here. It's not funny if you're flying.
No. Welcome to the Shawswing Podcast. Today, I have a very awesome guest. I'm honored to have you here, sir. So it is Robert Cujo Teschner, but we're going by Cujo.
That's right.
100% veteran, entrepreneur, speaker. I mean, there's so many different things that you have done, and I feel like you have such a interesting, fascinating story to tell. And so it's really, honestly, truly an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and I mean that sincerely. What a joy. What a beautiful place you have, by the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I was born and raised in Colorado, so, this is kind of home. As much as I've traveled the world and gone, seeing different places, it's always like, well, I want to come back here. And, obviously you got to spend some time here with your time in the Air Force.
That's right.
Which is, we're, I guess, probably 90 minutes away from there, or give or take. And that area has grown a lot in Colorado Springs and, Colorado just in general. I mean, from when I was a kid, it's a different place. Quite literally just different. So.
100%. Colorado Springs is now Denver South, and what used to be a completely remote, isolated campus that was hard to get to is now square in the middle of it all. And
it is literally the middle. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so nice out here.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, tell me about you growing up. Like what made you want to, enroll in the Air Force originally? Like where did that all come?
Good. So got to take you back a little bit further than growing up. We'll start with my mom, war refugee from Zagreb, Croatia. My grandparents, they were worried about the Soviet Union taking over Croatia, justifiably so. And so they made the decision to go their separate ways to Munich, and separate ways meaning grandfather went by himself because he knew that if he was captured as a member of the resistance, then they would kill his entire family. So
wow.
He goes solo, my grandmother and the three daughters, and I think that the ages were like 4 and then twin 2.5-year-olds or something like that, by foot. Rendezvous point is Munich, as I understand it. Main train station, noon to 1. That was the plan. Pre-cell phones, no way of.
So you're trusting you're getting there.
Trusting that you can get there, and that eventually the other side's going to get there too, and that there's going to be a big happy family reunion. Which it took like a year and a half to make that happen. The story of how they both separately got there is amazing. Grandfather at one point has a funeral mass for my grandmother and his daughters because he was convinced that they were dead, but keeps on going there anyway, just because,
Isn't that something?
He honors those who are lost, and then one day they showed up and they reunited. And
God, what can you imagine?
I can't.
No.
I can't. We get worried about this little inconvenience. The power's out. How we're going to deal with the cost of eggs. They're wondering if they're ever going to see each other again. There is no plan. They don't have anything. They're carrying whatever they can on their backs. I just don't understand.
Just a new level of difficulty.
A level of difficulty that we can't comprehend. And in the midst of all of that, my mother and her sisters benefited from the goodness of the GIs who were part of the occupation forces. So by the time that they get there, the Allies had liberated Germany, and you've got all these young guys who had been through all of this horror, who now see all of these kids out in the streets, and they're giving away their evaporated milk and their chocolate rations because they feel bad for these kids that are growing up in this horrific situation. My mom was one of those kids. Years later, she'll give birth to 3 boys of her own, all of whom joined the military. I went the Air Force route. My brother Anthony, he joined the Navy. My brother John joined the Army.
Wow.
And I think it's neat because she was able to then give back to the country that helped her by sending some people.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is. Yeah. And it was none of that was scripted. All of us, made the decision to do this on our own, but we were inclined in that direction. And part of it was when she eventually made her way with her family to St. Louis, she fell in love with my dad, who had an ambition to go join the Air Force and did. And so we grew up, all 3 of us, in an Air Force family. We were used to moving every 3 years, going to different places, making new friends, traveling the world. You know, when we lived in Germany as kids, a road trip involved going to another country for lunch, you know, and listening to different languages.
What was that like?
It was amazing. Like
Was
it was just a nonstop adventure. So much so that when my father retired eventually, I was disappointed. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Yeah, I was totally disappointed. I mean, he came to the end of his career and he's like, no, we're going to settle down someplace. I'm like, settle down? Who settles down?
We're not ready for that.
And I remember I was so disappointed that I said the day that he retired, I can't stand this and I'm joining as soon as I can. And so that was, I knew since I had seen the movie Star Wars in '77 that I was going to go the route of fighter aviation. And then that just sealed it. Like, okay, it's going to be Air Force fighter aviation. Got to be in the Air Force because Dad's leaving, and here we are.
So that for you, it was very much a one track.
Oh yeah,
you were in, like even as a kid.
100%. I mean, seeing Luke Skywalker and X-wings and all of these cool. things,
pretty awesome.
It was awesome.
It's pretty awesome.
It was mind blowing actually, and then that little movie that came out in '86 with Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis. You know, I kind of reinforced it. We were stationed in Germany at the time. And I saw that movie at an Air Force base, at an Air Force theater, which means at the beginning of the movie you stand up and there's the national anthem, and we're at a fighter base overseas, so there's a proximity of danger with the Soviet Union still in full effect. And I'm watching this movie in the base theater with a bunch of Air Force fighter pilots. And at the end of the movie, when they're showing all the different people, you know, and the names, everybody gets on their chairs and just starts screaming, and it was like this huge,
awesome.
You know, like yes.
Oh my gosh, that's like giving me goosebumps, man. That's cool.
As
that's
a
really
kid
really cool.
in the midst of that, I'm like, are you kidding me? Of course, I've got to do this. So.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's something, man. To have that kind of track. I mean, you know, so many kids I feel like now don't really know. You know, you ask them, hey, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And you know, somebody may say, hey, I'm going to be an astronaut, or I'm going to go, you know, be a professional athlete or something, you know, but it's to have that type of track and then follow through with it. And, you know, I mean, to say, because I've often wondered, you know, it like military families where you have to move around like that, you know, it's different for me because I went to school with the same kids all the way through. Like you have your friends, and, you know, it's from a pretty small town, so it wasn't a, you know, massive group of people, but, you know, it's just having to leave them, because I had friends that had to move, for example, when you've known them for how many years, and it was always tough because it's like, you know, back then you're trying to write letters to one another or whatever,
right?
Which then eventually the letters just stop and you move on, you know, and it's just something that happens. But like to be in it like that and then have to relocate like you did and then enjoy that, you know, go into a new setting, new place, new school, new, you know, surroundings, like all that. Like I'm sure that there were probably certain kids that didn't thrive, you know, with that, or it would be a challenge, right? But for you to accept it that way is huge.
Listen, I mean, there were the downs. I remember when we moved to Germany, we had this. We spent the summer with my family in St. Louis, and my dad comes from a big family, and my mom, you know, and her sisters. We had lots of cousins, and it was just this magnificent summer of joy. And then we have to hop on an airplane and go to some foreign country and be gone for 3 years. And I was really disappointed. I was very, very sad. I felt homesick even before we left. So that was the one really traumatic experience where I knew that we were going to be so distant from everybody. We wouldn't see them for a few years, and I really enjoyed being with them. That was tough. And yet we went to Germany, got there at a time when, you know, the world wasn't as small as it is right now. So we stood out. You know, I was wearing Nikes as opposed to Adidas, you know.
Sure.
Everybody, you know, commented on that. I went to German school. All right, so I'm an American in a German school. Don't speak any German. It was tough, but then 6 months in, I'm speaking mostly fluent German. I've changed shoes. You know, I've adapted some local cultures and whatnot. 3 years later, I'm dreaming, thinking in German. I become a little German kid, which was a really amazing cultural experience. I got to experience life unlike what my cousins did, and I came back so much more, you know, rounded, so much more understanding of the world in which we're living in, and I can't imagine not having that.
Sure.
And it was that thing that kind of set in motion, all right, I got to keep on doing this. This is so useful. I'm so grateful for it. Got to have if I ever have a family, they've got to experience this.
Sure.
And yeah, saying goodbye was hard, but when you're when you're doing it with a bunch of other kids that are also used to it, then it becomes somewhat easier.
That makes sense.
Because on the base, all the kids there were, they were used to uprooting and going to the new place.
Well, to experience, I was really grateful when because I, like I said, small town Colorado, never traveled, wasn't really on a plane. I think I took like an 8th grade trip was the first time I was ever on an airplane, so it wasn't really something that happened, and you kind of adapt to your surroundings. So it's like, you don't really think other things are out there. And I remember once I started competing internationally in strongman, you go and experience different countries, different cultures, ways that things are done, and your eyes kind of get opened to there's a very big world out there and a lot of different, people and the ways that people think and the ways they interact and all of these different things. And also, this is a little bit different topic, but it was like I went to South Africa and I remember driving on the road and it was, people living in basically like a tent, like shack. And I remember seeing stuff like that in other countries I went to. And it's like, wow, you are told maybe you should be grateful for what you have. And, you're very fortunate, as an American and some of the privileges and things that we have here that other countries just don't have. Until you see that with your own eyes, then it's that really hits home, right? Like you have that kind of aha moment of like, wow, that is literally what that person wakes up to every day and they have to figure it out, and so it's being grateful. But, as a kid, I can see exactly why that was such a great thing for you. Such a great thing, because it would just give you that world experience. And, it's like, I'm sure as you came back and were around different kids, it's just like, wow, I've had this experience and you haven't. And it's just a whole different world.
It was a completely different world. And it was almost disappointing actually to come back in some ways, and I had to readjust and kind of adopt American culture. But it was so transformative that I couldn't imagine not having it. And I was on one path only, and that was to continue what it was that my father did and serve in the United States Air Force, because that was the place that felt most like home to me. Been to Army bases and seen some other things, but Air Force was it.
That's awesome. So once you enrolled, was that everything that you expected? Like, how was it? What was the experience like getting in and, and having that now as what you were doing?
Well, the first experience was a complete failure because I did not get accepted to the Air Force Academy.
Oh, really?
And I put all the eggs in that basket. Like, I'm going to the Air Force Academy, so that's the only option. And then I got the nice rejection letter and didn't even say, hey, try again next year. It didn't say you came this close. It didn't suggest that there was, additional steps that could be taken to maybe happen in the future. It was like, you're done, goodbye.
Wow.
And that was kind of a crushing defeat because everything was centered around that. Because I thought, if you're going to go fly, the best place to kickstart that journey would be the Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
So I had to redirect and kind of come up with an alternative game plan. And then at the very last second, my mom comes and shares with me the fact that Senator called up while I was at school, and I just got appointed to the Air Force Academy. So I think I'm the tail end Charlie for the class of 1995. Like, a bunch of people had to turn down their appointments for me to get accepted.
Hey man, that's all right.
It worked out. All right. So you're looking at the last person admitted in my class, and I came out here, and it was not a joyful experience. Like it was 4 years that weren't fun. Every time that we came back, either through Denver International or through Colorado Springs, like there was like this, oh no, I got to go back to that place. And yet, looking back on it, all my favorite relationships, like my best friends on the planet, they all went there. We went through the shared experience together, which is a really important thing.
Yeah.
Learned so much while I was there, had so much good happen to me that I can't fathom not having been. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm actually overcome with emotion. Every time that I drive on that reservation, I remind myself how fortunate I was to get that last spot in my class, and how blessed I am to have my classmates as classmates, and how it all started there. Like the journey that I felt in my soul had to take place. It started there, and I'm forever grateful. And my experience as an Air Force officer met and then exceeded my wildest expectations.
What made it so tough? those first 4 years?
I mean, freshman year, you have no rights, you have no privileges really. You're yelled at by everybody. You're constantly in trouble. You can't do anything right. You're supposed to be here doing that. It's not. Freshman year is not so much about the academic journey as it is acclimating to military life and being transformed into a soldier, or in our case, an airman. So basic training followed by a year of not really having much. That was the harder part. And then as you go through the rest of it, it gets a little bit easier, but I contrasted the experience with my friends that were going to regular civilian universities, and they were kind of having a blast.
Sure. Oh, well, I'm sure, relatively speaking, they're probably very different.
Yeah, totally different experience.
Yeah.
And I look back on it and I'm like, well, if I hadn't gone there, who knows if I would have ever graduated? I may have had too much of a blast someplace else.
Hey,
lots of distractions. That's right. So you were very focused at the academy, got a great education, got a chance to see the world, and this was another highlight. I mean, I took every class that had as part of the class a trip.
Interesting.
So one of my years, I took 3 weeks to go tour the Middle East. I forget what the class was all about, but I do know that I toured the Middle East, got to go to the United Arab Emirates, got to go to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain.
That's crazy.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I took another class, a navigation class, where I got to literally help navigate the airplane across the Atlantic while we went to the UK. I want to say we went to France, maybe to Italy. Like, what a great experience that is.
That's insane.
That's part of the curriculum, is you got to go navigate. So those are the things. Took a summer trip out to the Orient. We went from California to Alaska to Japan to Korea and back.
That's wild.
Amazing. And I get to see the world and just understand all the different missions that are taking place all over the place, all the different partners, allies, friends that we work alongside, appreciate what their challenges are, what they're up against. And again, understanding this whole planet and that it's one big, it's just so much different stuff happening over
Absolutely.
Here. Getting touch points into it, all of it. I knew while I was there that this was the right thing to be doing. And now the next step is, let's go out there, learn how to fly one of these airplanes to go defend it all.
Yeah. What was it like the first time that, obviously you're training and going through all that, like when you got to go out and get into the cockpit, right?
So the first cockpit was here in Colorado. Okay. First cockpit was a glider.
Okay.
At the Air Force Academy. And we didn't have the resources to go out there and learn how to fly. A lot of my classmates had hundreds of hours of flight time. Maybe I had 8. Now that I think about it, while I was at the academy, my parents paid for me to go take some lessons down at Colorado Springs Airport. But when I was a freshman, I had none, and I jumped into a glider and got to experience flight without an engine. And that was a wow moment.
I bet.
So quiet, so serene, so peaceful, actually. And while you're doing that, you get to go solo. So a couple of, I don't know how many flights into it, you're doing it by yourself. And the fact that you can and that you've been trained by another cadet, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
A lot of trust placed on very, very young people. And that's going to be kind of the military experience. You're going to accelerate into a leadership position very, very early. A lot of responsibility is going to be heaped on your shoulders very early on in your journey, and that's never going to end. Fast forward, just a few years later, I'm flying an F-15 for the first time.
That's wild.
And you contrast it with this little yellow airplane, it's kind of compressed. Now it's this massive thing that you got to climb up a ladder into, and you're kind of looking down, you're like, there's a long way down, and there's all of these knobs and dials and switches, and it's overwhelming, and now you're going to go fly this sucker.
Yeah.
First time, luckily, there's somebody in the back seat. We do have some 2-seat versions just for these experiences, and I remember just being in awe of the experience and it all being surreal. Like, I'm living my childhood fantasy, my dream, and I can't believe that I'm actually getting paid to do this.
It's so cool. It's obviously just from the outside, I've never been in one and felt like, but just the power and like that experience has to just be insane.
It is. And you talk power. These things, they've got some oomph to them.
Yeah.
You plug in the afterburners on one of these airplanes and you take off, and you're just on a rocket ship, and you're experiencing forces that are inhuman.
Yeah.
You can pull, and you're limited by the airframe to 9 Gs. You could actually go beyond that. It's just the airplane probably isn't going to survive it for very long. You're never going to fly that airplane again. I know of at least one person who pulled 12.5 to avoid hitting the ocean.
Wow.
And flew the airplane back and landed. But it's a punishing experience that's so exhilarating.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets into your system, and you just want more of it.
So it's like an adrenaline rush.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the days when you're scheduled to fly, even if you're absolutely exhausted, just up all night, kids or whatever, and you're like, I think you get there. No matter how many times you've done it, every time that you strap on an F-15 or an F-22, you're 100% awake, and you just can't wait to go.
Yeah.
And then it's just a shame that it has to end at some point.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's that's something else, man. I mean, you can tell the way that you light up just talking about it. Like even right now, it's like just, I mean, I can feel that, and I bet I can only imagine the adrenaline rush that is. What's the most like G's that you ever pulled?
9.4.
9.4. What is that like?
Yeah.
What can you even describe it, or is it like, how does that affect you?
It's very hard to describe. It's a very brutal experience. It's hard to do most things because you're doing stuff to your body that your body is not supposed to really deal with. I mean, we condition ourselves for it. We get used to it. We know how to handle it, but it always hurts. All right, it always hurts. And when you maintain that high G loading for a long time, I mean, even 15 seconds, that's a long time.
Yeah, I bet it seems like an eternity.
It does. It's a very punishing experience. The first time that you experience it is in a centrifuge while you're getting ready to go to training. And the centrifuge profile only lasts a little while, like maybe, somebody's going to call us out for getting this wrong, but I don't know, 5-10 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
But you're going through these different phases, okay? And, they're like, okay, the first phase, we're going to take you up to whatever amount of Gs, and you just breathe normally, and we're going to establish a baseline for you for where things start to fade away. And then we're going to start to push it. And then you go up to a higher thing. And then at some point, if you're an F-15 pilot, you're going to go up to 9 Gs, and you're going to maintain it for X amount of seconds. And you're like, okay, let's get on it, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And you do it, and when you come down off of it, you're exhausted. And you've only done it for maybe 10 seconds. And then you go into another profile. Then you go into the last thing, which is going up and down, 8.5 down to 6, Oof. 7.5 down to 5, 7 down to 4.5, maybe back up to 8.5 or 9. And at the end of that 2-minute experience, all these kids, because we're all very, very young going through this, who have ambitions that night to go out and, have a great time now that the centrifuge is done.
Done.
Like, okay, all right, let's call it a night early, because you don't know what you don't.
It just probably hits you different.
It does, and it's just one of those things. It's grueling. So then later on, when you're out there doing, we would sometimes go through a week where we would fly.
Is this it here?
Yep, that's it. Nice job. That thing is a punishing experience.
So you just go in there, and then within that, they can change and manipulate how much you're feeling.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And you've got a stick. So depending on what airplane you're flying, the stick's either on the right side or it's between your legs, and you're pulling back on the stick to control it.
Wow.
And part of the deal is staying awake while you're controlling it and maintaining the G loading. And if you fall asleep in there, then you got to go back, do some conditioning, come back a few months later and try it again. And if you fail the second time, then you're done.
Done.
And when you watch people that have fallen asleep, and you're doing a fantastic job looking at this, and let me just look at what happens, how you look. And
like
I've seen some where they're losing consciousness.
Oh man,
it just looks horrible. And then it's even worse when they wake up.
Oh.
And you do this thing called the funky chicken. There we go.
Yeah.
And the people usually are like,
gosh,
what happened? They're unaware, blissfully unaware. And that's funny here. It's not funny if you're flying.
No.
And the problem is these airplanes can hit those high G loadings in no time flat.
Yeah.
So you're just flying along, and you're like, there's a bad guy.
Like something like that would happen would that be up by like a 9?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it would take quite a bit to...
It could.
Or you condition yourself to it.
You condition yourself to it, but in the centrifuge, you don't know where it is that you're going to have problems.
Okay.
So they're kind of testing you at different phases, and they're kind of working your way up to whatever the maximum G loading is for your airplane.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting. In fact, if you're out of the cockpit for 3 or more years, you got to go back through that thing. And that happened to me, and I was like, man, I'm a lieutenant colonel now, and I got to go back through the centrifuge.
So you're already at Wow.
I cannot afford to fail this thing.
No.
So what I did was, and the centrifuge was at the base that I was stationed at. So my family was there.
Okay.
So I invited them to come watch me. And I'm like, I cannot fall asleep in front of my kids.
No, 100% not happening. Yeah.
So they helped motivate me to stay awake.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So if you're 3 years, then you have to go back and
you got to go back and do that. And nobody looks forward to it. It's like, it's not like, we get to go experience that again.
It's not a fun thing.
The centrifuge is the least fun thing.
Okay.
When you're out there and you're actually flying it, the adrenaline kicks in, you know what you're doing. It's all instinctive. You know how to breathe. You know how to, because really the blood's racing from your brain into your hands and feet.
Yeah.
That's what causes you to pass out. So you got to fight to keep the blood in your brain. And so there's these muscle movements that we do to control and force the blood back up. We also wear some additional gear that kind of helps us keep the blood back up. You're doing all this while you're looking over your shoulders at the person that's trying to kill you, while you're maneuvering and communicating. It's just a fun thing to experience.
That's crazy.
And when you become good at it, it's really fun. It's punishing. It still hurts. You burst all the capillaries, on your arms and legs. We call these things geasels. And after a mission, you come back and it just looks kind of gross. But it's just a fun world to be in.
It sounds fun, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds very challenging.
It is, and that's part of what's fun. Because if you can step up, embrace that challenge, and become good at it, that's a really rewarding experience. And we have in a fighter squadron, there's a list. We have it somewhere on the walls. Who's our top gun this week? Who's our top gun this month? And you're always looking to be at the top of that thing, not the bottom.
So there's competition within I would imagine all of it.
Constant.
Yeah. So how often was your name up there?
I don't remember, but often enough to be able to have a very fulfilling career.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I got to go to our fighter weapons school. And I got to go through as a student at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School, and then eventually come back and teach there. And of all the things that I've ever done, that was the biggest honor, the greatest gift, having the opportunity to go and work with that crowd of people and to be able to teach there and hone my teaching skills and to fly with the best that we've got and to be the best that I ever could be. That was amazing and an all-time honor. And it was also where I met my future wife. It's also where we got married. So there's a lot.
Gosh,
there's
awesome,
a lot tied to that. Some parallels with the Top Gun movies. So yeah,
that's really cool. Mm-hmm. Really, really cool. I mean, it's got to be an experience. So you going and serving, like what was that like when you were on tour? Like, I mean, that had to be different. Like, because now you've done all the training. But like to actually go, like if you're watching Top Gun, right? Like it's like, hey guys, all right, now we've done the training. It's mission time. Like this is real.
That's
like,
right.
It's just that's got to be a whole different animal.
It is, and the experience is different. Like my father was in the Vietnam War.
Okay,
and
my dad was too.
Okay, so totally different experience than I had. We technically flew combat missions. We technically flew over Iraq, but there was really no competition. It wasn't that anybody was meeting us in the skies trying to shoot us down. They're trying to shoot us down from the ground. In Vietnam, you had aircrew that were flying the same routes every single day. They knew that they were at risk. They still did it because they were operating with absolute honor and integrity, but they were losing people. I mean, I think the F-105 community, one of the airplanes that we flew in Vietnam, lost like 35% of their pilots. That I can't fathom.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. I hold those folks in the highest of regard. I mean, absolute respect. And we had a totally different experience. So for us, being deployed meant being away from family, living in places that you wouldn't typically choose to, but it wasn't as dangerous of an experience for sure. I mean, no comparison with the Vietnam War, even with Desert Storm. It was just being gone, watching your skill set atrophy a bit. And so it was really not that hard. It was just the patience factor of having to wait to go back home and then relearn the skill set that we lost while we were downrange deployed. So just kind of a different thing. But one of the things that would typify a fighter squadron is we were always ready to go. Like we prided ourselves on having gotten our skill set to the level where if the nation needed us to go do something of relevance, we were ready to go. Always ready. Yeah. And that was a mark of honor, a badge of distinction, and something that was really cool about that world. And if something were to kick off, I promise you this, we wanted to be in it.
Yeah.
Did not want to be left behind.
Makes sense.
It happened to us. It actually happened in one of the squadrons that I was assigned to. In fact, right when I got back, at my graduation from the weapons school, I was told, get back immediately because things are brewing and we're going to need you to be ready. And I'm like, okay, good. This is it. And then the country that we were supposed to deploy to at the last minute canceled our ability to deploy there. So we did get left behind. And there was just this sense of, all right, I mean, this is what we've been training for.
Yeah.
We're ready to go now, and we didn't get to. And so that was tough. That was a difficult experience for the squadron.
100%.
So
yeah, that's something. So Desert Storm, because you said you enrolled in 91.
That's right.
And we may have been talking before we started the podcast. So Desert Storm lined up like that was 92, right? The start of that?
So,
or am I off on that?
Just a little bit off.
Okay.
Like while I was finishing up high school, all that's kicking off.
Okay.
And, I was wondering, like, are they going to accelerate, bring people from the academy on active duty immediately to go?
Sure.
Of course, that was nowhere near. But there was this, I'd say in those days, like this sort of patriotic element here that was kind of universal. There was a strong push towards joining the military, so there was a lot of people that were looking to come in. We had a big enrolling class at the Air Force Academy as a consequence of that. And it was the generation that flew there that trained me.
Okay.
And one of the things that's interesting is that, everybody kind of thinks of themselves in a heroic light, I think, when they fantasize about what it might be like to be out there doing the thing.
Yeah.
You don't know who you are, though, until somebody shot at you. And the folks that trained me went through that and did an exceptional job. And I knew that when they were training me. I knew what they had been through. I understood. They'd tell the stories on Friday at the squadron bar of their experiences. And so I hold them to this day in the highest of regard. And I was so fortunate to get a chance to learn from them.
That is neat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a respect level that I can, it's just, you're learning, but it's, again, if somebody has gone through that experience, I mean, it's just next level, and something that, like, learning from somebody like that, I imagine was a great thing.
It was amazing. And the fact that they brought me into their tribe and they made me one of them. I mean, I'm a 51-year-old man as we tape this thing. I still prefer to be known as Cujo. Why? Because they accepted me.
Yeah.
And the fact that people that had done so well in a really demanding line of work said, you're one of us now. I'll never forget, and I'll never give that up either. I'm very, very fortunate to have been named by them and to be given a call sign Cujo. And this whole notion of passing on what it is that we've learned is a big deal for us. The original fighter weapons school, it was known as the Fighter Gunnery School in 1949. And the point of the Fighter Gunnery School was to take the lessons from World War II that we had learned in combat and to pass them on to a new generation that hadn't been in that combat. And at a time when we're shifting strategy, and we're kind of thinking Cold War and bombers and nuclear and this kind of stuff. So there's a pocket of fighter pilots. So we cannot ever let the skill set atrophy that we learned in such a horrific way.
Yeah.
And so they created the school to pass on that lesson, and we've been passing that lesson on from generation to generation to generation, and it's worked out magnificently. So to be part of that and to be able to help perpetuate it was another highlight of an absolutely great career. So I guess going back to your question of, how did it all turn out? It far exceeded, now that I think about it,
that's
my expectations.
I mean, it sounds like it 100%. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then you coming back in, talk about a little bit of, the stuff that you were able to implement within the Air Force, which, as we go through your story a little bit more, like, when you, and I'm fascinated to hear about that, like how, your career in the Air Force came to an end, and, how different doors open and challenges you went through yourself. I mean, there's a lot there for sure. So
absolutely.
I don't know what makes sense with the storyline to say, but
here's what makes sense, Brian. So when I was at the weapons school as an instructor, I remember thinking early on in my experience there, what we're doing here, how we're building teams here, is so good, and it needs to be done elsewhere as well. We've figured out this leadership thing. We've figured out this teamwork thing. And if there's a way that we can cross-apply that learning, these skill sets, someplace else, like the world of business, I think that would be a huge benefit to the business world.
Big time.
So that was the thought back then. It was precipitated by my future wife sharing some stories about leadership that she'd experienced, things that she saw that might be a little bit broken, and me comparing that with my experience. Fast forward a little while later, about a decade or so later, I get diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And that was the tipping point out of the career that I really, really enjoyed. And when I found that I had this cancer, that was a jarring moment. When I talked to the surgeon and asked him if I could fly again after the surgery, he's like, "You're going to rip apart from the inside at 9Gs. I wouldn't recommend it." That was so sad.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's the kind of thing that I really enjoyed doing that.
100. Yep. You had trained for that. You lived for that. Like
that was me. I actually used to I thought that I was built to be a fighter pilot. I thought that was my reason for being. But because of that, and because we knew that like this was just a momentary obstacle, something that was probably going to be good in the long run, if we could overcome it, the story would be a lot better to be able to tell. It gave me the opportunity to put the theory to practice and to take what it is that I learned while I was teaching at the Fighter Weapons School and bring it to business. And so that leads to where we are today. Built a business around teaching the principles that allowed us to field high performance teams in a really difficult environment, bring that to the business world and build those kinds of teams here. And it's been so rewarding, so satisfying that maybe, as I think back on it, I was a fighter pilot to do what it is that I currently do.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating. You know, I think when you look back, and I think your perspective changes as you go through life.
That's right.
And, you know, in the moment, when you're in the moment, sometimes getting out of that moment and being able to look back a little bit more, it gives some more clarity to maybe why things line up and why they happen. And you know, it's such a fascinating thing to hear you say that, because I know for me, I've looked back on certain moments and challenges and things that I've gone through and said, well, you know, you don't know in the moment why that's happening, but maybe it's that door closing a little bit so another door opens. And, you know, obviously you've taken that, you know, challenge, and hopefully the cancer wasn't too bad, you know, to get through that. I'm sure that was a challenge in itself for you, but, you know, you could maybe talk a little bit about that. How?
Absolutely. In fact, of all the things that happen in life, the cancer diagnosis ends up being in many ways one of the better things. And the reason for this, and I say this with a degree of caution, because so many people that are listening either have cancer right now or have a loved one who has cancer right now, and the story isn't that good, and I'm very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say what I say is that when we're hit with this, and it comes out of left field, we're not expecting this in any way. I mean, I was young, I was fit, I was much
probably
better shape.
The last thing that you would
thing. In fact, I was getting ready to go back to the F-22. Like things were looking really good. I was on a career trajectory that was very positive. When this thing happens, the first thing that my wife and I did was we went to lunch. Reason for that was we found the tumor in a colonoscopy, and I was starving. Okay, I'd been not eating for a day and a half or whatever. She was 6 months pregnant with our fourth child, so she was always hungry. So it just made sense, even though the news was horrible, that we go to lunch. I didn't want to die hungry.
Of course, yeah, you could get some food.
So we're sitting there in this German cafe in Stuttgart. And there's nobody there. It's like 3:00 in the afternoon when this thing happens. And so we're just totally alone. We're just still floored by the news. And the doc said it would take 5 days to get the biopsy results back. So we still have to wait to figure out just how bad the news was going to be. Man. I looked my wife in the eyes and I said, I just wanted you to know one thing. Our story just got better. And the reason for saying that wasn't pride. It wasn't forecasting that someday I'd be on your podcast to talk about it. It was coming from living in a world of fighter combat. You know that nothing ever goes according to plan. The thing about our fighter squadrons, writ large, all high-performance teams, is we know that things aren't going to go according to plan. But we also know that whatever it is that happens, whatever the obstacles are along the way, we're going to find a way. That's how we're tuned. That's how we're built. we're going to find a way to still achieve mission success. And when we do, the story that we get to tell at the squadron bar on Friday night is so much better than if everything had gone exactly according to plan. And so what I found was in that moment, that life that I had lived, that I'd wanted to live since I was a 4-year-old, comes back to serve me. And I told her the things that were instinctive. And the output of that conversation was our mindset, because she came back and she immediately said, I agree. And what we were basically saying is we're going to find everything that we can control, and we're not in control of much here.
Sure.
But whatever we can, we're going to dominate with. And it drew us closer together, actually. One of the reasons why I see this as being a benefit to us is we became tighter in the midst of this experience. It was just the two of us. I mean, we're away from family, we're overseas, different culture. She didn't speak German. And it drew us in. It also drew in the kids. Okay, and they got a chance to see Dad and Mom and all of us go through a really difficult time. And so we were intentional about giving a good example, not being defeatist here, but actually talking about all the good that's coming from this, trying to find ways to show them that this doesn't have to crush us. In fact, we can find a way through this. And so the family became tighter as a result of it. And then the Air Force was kind of taken away, though the Air Force gave me the opportunity to stay in and do whatever I wanted to. I didn't get a chance to fly any longer, and so I decided to retire early. It opened the door into this idea of let's help businesses to build the kinds of teams that we enjoy in high-performance military organizations. And it allowed me to go down another path, which I found to be incredibly rewarding. So that was a huge bonus. It also allows me to hopefully sometimes kind of inspire people who are going through a tough time to make a decision about how we're going to address this time. And though, again, I wasn't in control, and I'm incredibly blessed that through surgery we were able to eradicate the cancer and that I'm healthy now. It could have gone a different way.
Yeah.
The idea that, like, okay, we're going to be positive through this, that's important. And we came through it. Hopefully that's a good example. And so anyway, there's just so many benefits to this that
I mean, you here's the thing is you said your story got better. The story did get better, but it's what I think is so neat about that and hearing that is the way that you took it, the way that it got, you and your wife closer, your family unit closer, right? And I can just tell right now that there was never any moment where there wasn't a positive mindset about how you were going to attack it and how it was going to be overcome. Right. And I think that, a lot of times people, just that in itself, your mindset can control so much of the outcome of any situation that you're in. Right. Like if you have a negative thought, if you're thinking negatively, it's going to bring on negative. If you're thinking positive, it's going to bring on positive. Right. So like it's so awesome to hear you say that because, a lot of people get news like that and obviously they're down, they're negative, and then they start to probably feel sorry for themselves or the situation or whatever, and then even potentially push people away. And like for you to get closer, and it sounds like your wife very much has an amazing mindset herself, and you two together now it's just a stronger bond and a stronger that type of marriage. I'm very fortunate that I feel like I have the exact same thing, with my wife, and, certain situations we've gone through together have brought us closer, cause you're that unit, right? Like you're together. So
that's right.
It's such a great thing. I think, a lot of people, can take that away from any challenging situation. It doesn't have to be cancer or something like that, but it's so neat to hear you talk about that. And the way that you talk about it is so empowering.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
I would not have written the story this way, and yet I'm so grateful that it unfolded the way that it did. And we fell deeper in love as a consequence of it. My appreciation for my children went through the roof. They were so kind to me. Recovery was the hardest part. I mean, I was so broken. I was so hurting. GI surgeries, they're tough to get through. I was a grouchy guy, even with a positive attitude.
Sure.
They accommodated that. The kids understood what Dad was going through. I mean, who does that at a young age?
Right.
My kids did.
Sure.
They understood. They had a deep, profound grasp of all of this. And our faith deepened in ways that I cannot describe to you. So for all of these reasons and then some, That's why I say it was good for us, in full understanding that it's not that way for everybody. And having lost relatives and dear friends due to cancer, I know what a horrible thing this is. Daily prayer is that we can eradicate this from the planet.
100%. I agree.
But I mean, this is life. Life is overcoming challenges. Nobody, and I mean, we see people posture all the time on social media, like, everything's always great.
Sure.
That's not the truth. It's not the truth. So far from the truth. One of the jobs that I had after I was out of the Air Force was a mortgage loan officer. So I go from a bird colonel to selling mortgage loans over the phone. And what I found was the truth. Like, when you see some of these actual finances, the truth of what's actually going on. So many people posture.
Sure.
Part of this life is overcoming the challenges that we're faced with. And, the question is, how do you do that? Do you do it in a confident, optimistic manner? Do you do it in a way that says the world's against me and there's no hope? So these are all forcing functions to try to drive us in a direction, and we can choose which direction we want to go. And we've chosen the positive, optimistic route.
Oh, it's a great choice, right? Like going down that path. So getting out, you decide to retire early, have the goal of basically being an entrepreneur now and creating that path for yourself. Did those doors open quickly?
It took a little while.
Like how did you lay that framework out to make that happen?
Yeah, it took a minute, and probably looking back on it, I was a little bit too hasty in giving up my career. I'll retire early. I'll take a demotion on my retirement because I didn't serve 3 years in my final rank, and I'll go back confident that everything's going to be 100% easy and work out somehow. Ended up joining a startup that never started. That was a semi-traumatic experience.
I bet.
That was the tipping point into, oh no, we've got a real catastrophe here. No paychecks in a long time. Need to find something now. Enter the mortgage loan business.
Okay.
And this was at a time when my body was very much broken. So when you have colorectal resection or a colon resection, your body does not work the way that it once did. And in my case, it was 100% unpredictable. So I was in the bathroom a lot.
Oh man.
And like when it came on, it was like very, very quick, like no hope, like better might be driving someplace. So I needed a job where I could be in the bathroom a lot or, work from home.
Sure.
And this gave me that opportunity. So, and this was before working from home becomes a thing, This
I bet that was early. Yeah.
So I'm a trendsetter. All right.
Sure. You made it happen.
So I'm working there, and I'm experiencing teamwork now in a totally different way, and I'm watching leadership unfold in a totally different way from what I was used to. And it really told me a couple of things. One, my instincts about the need for what it is that I used to teach are correct. Two, that's who I am. I'm a teacher. I'm not this version of me, which is there's no problem with that version of me, and I learned a ton from being in 2 small businesses. But I needed to get to being me fully again, and that meant taking what it was that I knew and transferring that to folks who wanted to have that knowledge transfer. And so it took a couple of years, but finally we went all in. Took all the money that we had, and it wasn't very much that was left. Took a loan from a dear friend to keep us going for about 6 months.
Wow.
And then said, all right, here we go. Let's start this business, and let's do some knowledge transfer. Let's do some teaching. Let's try to build teams that win. And one of the riskiest things that I've ever done, and I lived a life of high risk as a fighter pilot, one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done, and that's without a doubt.
So was it you and your wife together? Like, was she involved with it, or was it mainly you and she was just being supportive?
She was 100% supportive.
Okay.
Not involved in the early days.
Okay.
Eventually, as things expand, I'll bring on an assistant, and then we'll have a couple of other instructors alongside me. And when my assistant left because her family expanded, that's where my wife steps in as a temporary stopgap measure.
Okay.
It turns out that she's such a great member of the team that even when I've asked her to, you go be free,
do something.
Like you don't have to do this any longer.
Yeah.
Like she's indispensable to us, and it's
Sure.
it's hard, and she actually loves working, and it's one way for us to stay connected.
That's really cool.
I'm here with you in Denver. She's back with the kiddos in St. Louis, which is our adopted home.
Yeah.
This is one of the ways that we stay connected is by her being on our team,
That's
knowing
really
exactly
neat.
what's going on. And it is so neat. So it keeps us close even when we're far apart.
I love it. I love it. So you start doing that, and was the primary, like, were you just going and saying like, hey, I think I can help your business execute better, like, or come in and, I mean, where
ish.
Okay.
Ish. So the first test of does this work happens in a company in St. Louis. Principal loved what we did for the company, and by we, what I did for the company, and said, hey, listen, I'm part of this organization, this entrepreneurial organization. I'd like for you to come speak for them. Organization's called Vistage Worldwide. So I go do this talk for Vistage Worldwide, basically as a way of saying thank you for writing me the biggest check that I've ever seen,
Yeah.
Mr. Business Principal. Go speak there. They asked me, Vistage did, to go on the road and start bringing this presentation that I had done for free to groups of these business leaders, CEOs and key executives. And this was at a time when I was still broken. So saying yes to the requests to be on the road meant having to find a way to work with a broken body and get it to a degree of sufficiency that was far beyond what the doctor said was possible. So I said, all right, this is a great forcing function. Let's do it. And what the company really was about in the early days was me trying to overcome my brokenness while giving these presentations.
Challenge.
It was. And the biggest fights I've ever had with my bride were the night prior to a long trip in an aluminum tube, which I'm a pilot by training, and yet now with a broken body, I'm scared about being a toddler in an airplane because I can't trust my body any longer.
Sure.
It was tough, and she was so kind to me.
That's nice.
She knew why I was such a grouch, and she was I wouldn't say she was okay with it. She was so kind to me in return, knowing why. All right, hoping that eventually I would move past that.
Yeah, Cora. Well, I mean, it's again, it's stuff that people don't think about, right? It's an unforeseen challenge.
That's right.
And you're at this point where you're building something new and get an opportunity, and it's like, well, I don't know if I can take the opportunity because I can't trust my body, and it's such a back and forth. Like, I can imagine in your head, it's like
so many games played in the brain, so many questions asked, so many stories told, but anyway, we just did it. Went out there and did it. And it's been so rewarding. I mean, today, for example, woke up, went and spoke for 3.5 hours, drove back, did a virtual presentation for 1.5 hours, hopped in the car, drove over here. Here we're talking.
So you've had a day, man.
Had a full day.
Yeah.
But my body, though it's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
It's risen to the challenge. And
that's amazing.
I'm grateful for that. And so taking this on the road and learning how to do it and learning how to adjust with a body that was broken, all part of a great story for which I'm forever grateful.
So now, was this the kind of the start of your company? Was VMax Group?
That's right.
So is that when that started, and that's kind of when everything was taken off there?
That's right. So early days, VMax Group, me going up by myself, and then people started to hear about me. They'd ask me to come in and work with their companies. We'd post about that on LinkedIn, my wife and I would, and the next thing you know is other fighter pilots who were thinking about doing other things with their lives said, hey, Cujo, would love to come join you. So now we start growing the team, growing the admin team.
That's awesome.
Being more specific about how we teach what we do, more programs. And now we're at a point where I can foresee not being on the road so much.
That's incredible.
Longer, which is amazing. And our programs are incredibly effective. And watching that come to life has been so transformative. And all of this courtesy of what I learned as a fighter pilot, tipping point cancer that causes me to go down this path and become an entrepreneur. And I love it.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, it's a neat story, like how it goes through and all of these experiences. And, I would imagine that's pretty rewarding now to be able to go speak like you do and, impact so many different people in so many different ways.
Listen, there was a great illustration of this. There was a keynote that I was doing at a beautiful hotel in Nashville.
Okay.
Right? And as I'm getting ready to leave, we've got 2 really sick kids. I mean, we're talking like we're wondering if we need to take them to the hospital. And I'm feeling guilty about leaving my wife in a lurch. Like, I can't do this to you. So I told her, I'm like, I'm just going to cancel. She's like, you can't cancel. I'm like, yes, I can. We've got 2 really sick kids. You need help here. She's like, I can handle this. Somebody needs to hear your message. You need to go. And so now I'm wondering,
Wow.
is this some sort of test? You know,
Yeah, am I supposed to do it?
Like, do
Yeah.
I then stay behind to pass the test? But she's an honest person. She doesn't play these kinds of games. So I'm like,
Okay.
all right. I'm like, okay, I'm leaving very guiltily,
Yes.
but I'm going to go do this because you said so. So anyway, fast forward. I get up on the stage. Big conference, beautiful Gaylord Hotel in Nashville. And the way that I started the keynote that day was, hey, listen, I've got 2 really sick kids at home. I mean, really sick kids. And I pray that they get better. And I told my wife I'm going to cancel being here today. And she said, no, you need to go. Somebody in this audience needs to hear your message. And I said, so whoever you are, I'm here for you. And then I did the keynote.
So you started. Exactly.
I started that way. That's exactly.
Wow.
I said to whoever, and I meant it. I'm like, whoever you are, I just want you to know the only reason I'm here is for you. And then I did my thing. Did a book signing afterwards.
Okay.
3.5 hours long. Okay, nobody knew who I was coming in there. I don't have your reputation. Okay, so like nobody knows who I am.
Yeah.
Signing these books, and so many people in that line said, I'm the reason that you're here.
Oh my gosh.
Many of them with tears.
Yeah.
Took so many pictures, signed. We ran out of books. At some point we ran out of books. So I'm signing the program. And the point wasn't the signature. Again, nobody knows who I am. The point was it connected, and something about the story and how it was that we navigated the turbulence and our mindset and the things that we took away from it and how it is that we built a stronger family team resonated for so many people. And she was right.
That's incredible.
Oh my gosh. And it was so moving, and I'm so grateful for it. And the kids were okay. And she did a great job making it through. But we've taken that approach to everything that we do. And our purpose is to teach and inspire real teamwork so that teams thrive in disruption and keep our economy strong. She buys into that. That's our why. This is how we derive meaning and impact. And we see it all the time, and it's so fulfilling. So again, I used to think I existed to be a fighter pilot. I think I was a fighter pilot to do what it is that I'm doing now. And I love doing it. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to.
Yeah, that's something, man. I mean, like, just being able to go and share, I love it too. It's something I'm getting more into and being able to do. And, you go through and you have these experiences in life or life experience in different things that you do, but then being able to translate that to people with mindset and how to be productive and how to execute, especially under pressure, and a lot of people don't, and it's so neat to hear that you identified that early, had the thought early, and now the doors have opened for you to do this. It's great. And I think that, it's a rewarding thing, right? It's a rewarding thing to be able to do something like that, because now I guarantee of all the companies and CEOs and different people you've interacted with, they're executing on a higher level because of something that you shared with them. And I mean, something like that is now it's going out and affecting more and more people. And it's so neat, man. I mean, just to think of it like that, right? Like just that story from Nashville.
That's right.
Like how many of those people that were sitting in that crowd in Nashville went on to carry something that you said with them out and share it with somebody else. Or, I mean, it's such a great thing when you think of it like that, and the positive impact that can be made on the world in general is huge, and it all starts with one person that's a catalyst that you are, so it's fun, man. I mean, I'm excited to hear the story and excited, that's what's happened for you.
It is fun. It is 100% fun. And it's a perpetuation of the original idea. 1949, the aerial gunnery school. Let's take the lessons we learned the hard way, and let's make sure that a new generation learns them. Fast forward 2025, we're out here taking the lessons that were instilled in us and transferring them to a new generation and in a different discipline. Most of the people that I talk to aren't fighter pilots.
Sure.
Probably never will be. And that's awesome, actually, because they're taking the principles that we've battle tested and proven to be true and applying them to their own battles. And whether that's in the health front, whether that's working in a business, whether it's trying to keep the family together that's about to fall apart, all of those are worthy battles to fight. And if you can take some of these things that we were gifted and apply them to your own benefit, that's a huge victory.
Yeah, it's really, really huge, man. Well, talk to me about some of the books that you've done. We got Debrief to Win, which you said was obviously a lot of your principles and everything, that you teach and talk about is in this book. So I would highly recommend that to people, to check that out. But what was it like writing? And, you've done a couple books now, right? So like,
That's right.
What has that experience been like for you?
It's fun. I mean, I was a political science major down the road at the Air Force Academy.
Okay,
so writing was a part of it. So this is all about taking and distilling what it is that I learned in a way that is practical, people can use. And it was a really cool experience to put together. Started on Monday, finished it on Friday.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty quick to write just because I'd been in my heart. And it's all about how we use accountability differently from the world. In a fighter squadron, accountability is practiced in a forward-looking, positive, optimistic way, not a backwards-looking, blame-oriented way. And we don't need to hold each other to account for what happened. We're fully vulnerable. We admit to everything that took place because our only ambition is to learn from it, to have a better experience tomorrow. And when you you just think about that, like our only ambition is to learn from today, to have a better day tomorrow. Where would that not apply? And how much better could things be if we did? So there's a spiritual underpinning to all of this. There's so much good that comes from it in so many different ways. And the whole essence of the book is, let's take this positive, optimistic, forward-looking approach to accountability and apply it to a world that's so critical, where everybody's looking backwards and blaming, judging, rushing to judgment. I mean, just tearing each other apart, so divided.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize in writing this book was that it may be part of the story of how it is that we repair ourselves. We define accountability as taking absolute ownership for the outcomes that a team achieves. Who does that in politics? Who does that in society? I mean, like my side's right, your side's wrong. Yep. You suck, we don't. Not very helpful when you're trying to navigate things together, right?
Sure, not.
Interestingly, in that world, like we have to own what it was that took place. If we don't, we're cut from the team.
Yep.
You have to be honest and upfront. You got to operate with integrity. And when we get together to practice accountability, everybody brings the truth to light. We shine the light on the truth with the ambition being to learn from it, to help us, to work together to have a better day tomorrow. So actually, I didn't know how deep this thing was going to get over time, but it's gotten very deep. And the book is the origin story to how I learned to bring this to the business space. And that's one of the better things that I've done, not because it's a great book, but because of all the things that it sparked. Yeah. And I wrote the book to help me to understand so that I could teach. And it's about time to go back in and revisit it and to update it based upon what I've learned teaching it. But it was a great experience.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. What you have learned teaching it, that's neat.
That's right.
That's a neat statement.
In a nonstop learning process, every time that I go teach, just like this morning, I learned something from the experience. Some questions were asked of me today that hadn't been asked before, and I'm so grateful for that because it's going to cause me to go back and reflect and probably update and refine how it is that I teach.
Interesting.
How amazing.
Yep.
And if I could chart the perfect environment for me, it would be a cave somewhere with internet access and tons of books. Yeah. So I could go back and just research more and write more and share more about what's up here.
Yeah.
The downside to being on the road constantly is that there isn't that much time to do that kind of reflection and writing. But there's a lot of more books that need to be written.
No, it's amazing, man. And you have so much road in front of you if you're looking forward, like what's possible. As you have those experiences, like this chapter, if you will, of your life, it's like, all right, well, there's going to be even more that comes out of that. And you're able to share even more. And,
100%.
It's kind of, and just the mindset that you have about it and the way that you apply it, it's, being open to learning. A lot of times, like people will close their mind off and say, hey, I know everything. I'm the expert. And they kind of stop, right? Like it's just this baseline, but like to say, hey, you've had all of this experience. You're now in a position where you're teaching today. Questions are asked and it's like, hey, those are great questions. You just made me better because you asked that question. Like being able to approach things like that is huge. Really, really huge.
Listen, even when I was the expert, I never knew everything.
Yep.
And one of the things that I love the most about our approach in the F-15 division of the weapons school, between classes, we would go someplace. Like we'd sometimes go up to Alaska with 2 classes a year, 5.5 month long periods each time. Kind of a grueling experience. We needed a break. So we'd go up, take a week, and we'd just review the syllabus.
Interesting.
And as we reviewed the syllabus, away from wherever home was, we would get into huge fights. I mean, we'd have these huge, just knockdown, tear down fights about tactics, about the way things should be based upon what we experienced. And we would take the baseline and advance on it. And in the midst of arguing passionately about what we believed in, we'd have these, it was, in our case, a bunch of guys and very, very emotional about this stuff.
Sure.
And it was so good because in the midst of all this, we understood why we were doing the things that we did. We also understood why we weren't going to go teach this class because it wasn't ready yet, or why it was that we were going to change something around over here for this class. And that approach has always informed the way that I've looked at this. We know, all of us do at VMax Group, the leadership company. We know that what we have right now is this version of it, and it will evolve based upon what we learn. And we're going to never stop learning, and we're going to constantly advance our understanding of and then our ability to articulate that. And that's part of what makes it so exciting. If I ever give this up, I fear that I'm just going to conk out and and pass away. Yeah. So this is such a vibrant thing, and I couldn't imagine not doing this. And we love it, and we have our own arguments amongst the team about how things need to be translated and whatnot. That's so fun.
Sure, and it drives obviously forward thinking and innovation, and all of the great things that come from that are wonderful. I mean, it's you constantly should be looking at how you can improve and how you can do things better, how you can execute better. All of those types of things are so important, on a day-to-day basis. And, for everywhere from the individual to, somebody that's working at a company, somebody that owns a company. I mean, all these type of things are so impactful, man.
Yeah. And I tell you, over long periods of time, especially when we've experienced lots of success, it doesn't do good for the unit. It actually does bad stuff. Like you get too arrogant and eventually complacent. And complacency is a killer. So a little bit of arrogance, I think, is a good thing. I think that you have to believe in yourself and and trust that you are going to dominate. There's the only way that you're winning all these awards is by having some of that. But too much of it is a poison, and it leads to a complacency of I don't have to push myself any longer. I don't have to try anymore. In the flying business, I'm no longer in fear of my environment. I'm not worried about following checklists and procedures. Those are for other people, not for me. And that's where you become a menace to others. Yeah. So you can't give in to that. And, I picked the surgeon who did the surgery on me. I said, you remind me of myself. You got just enough arrogance. You got total competence. I trust that you're going to do this thing right. Yep. And I knew that he would never get complacent. And I knew that he would make sure that he was 100% accurate. That's what we're looking for. Yeah. So in our company, we do the same thing, and that's what we teach.
That's incredible, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming. Where can people find more about you if they want to, research or learn about the books or any of your speaking or the company or any of that?
Yeah, look, I mean, our website is vmaxgroupllc.com, VMaxGroup.LLC.com.
Awesome, we got it.
There it is. There. Looks beautiful. And that's an easy way to connect with us. And we do everything that you'd expect from a group of ex-fighter pilots and one Navy SEAL that brings high-performance teamwork to work for you. So love to connect there.
Love it. I love it. Well, like I said, I really appreciate your time. I know you've had a big day, and you coming here and sharing what you have will impact people that have listened to this in a big way. So I appreciate it, man. And getting to know more about you has been wonderful.
You do a magnificent job. And there's just something wonderful that radiates from you. You're just a good man. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. And just know it's a privilege to be here with you. It is my honor to spend this time with you. I'm sorry that it's coming to an end because I've really enjoyed it.
Me too, man. I really, really have. I mean, it's like some of those things that you talked about there with, being in the cockpit. It's like, it just, you bring it to life, and like, it's such a fun thing. And, just people doing what they do and executing at a high level. It's like, for me, there's nothing better, really. Getting to connect with people like you, and it's like stuff like this for me. Like, I feel more alive in doing it. So it's something that I can personally take a lot away from this too, and that's what I love about it more than anything. So,
thank you for doing it.
Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully, you guys enjoyed that podcast. If you did, if you could share it, that would really help us out. It gets it spread out to more and more people. And, if you have any questions at all, topics you want to hear about, you can email into askbrian@shawstrength.com. But appreciate all you guys. Hope you're all doing amazing for now. Go out and be great, and we'll check you guys later. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and would like to listen to another, click right here. And to stay informed about new podcast episodes, click here to subscribe.